States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we're going to start with our public input statement by the Vice Chair.
The first public input session is a 15-minute session with each person having no longer than 3 minutes in which to make a statement. A second public input session may be held at the end of the meeting if allowed by the board chair. The speaker will give his or her name, address, and reason for speaking. Public input is designed for Noble residents. The board chair may grant non-residents the opportunity to address the board. Statements concerning subject matter that falls under the law regarding executive sessions cannot be made during public input. For example, matters involving personnel.
And that said, do we have any public input tonight from anyone?
You know, you guys get extra credit if you come up here and talk.
I don't think they believe you. I don't think they believe you. Not happening. They don't want it that bad.
Saga Lily. Saga, you're leaving us hanging here. Saga Lily, you're leaving us.
Okay, moving on then to the minutes of October 4th and October 18th. The 4th we couldn't approve because we didn't have a quorum, right? Now we do, right? So,
I hope, yes, I think we should have a quorum tonight.
Yeah.
There were a couple of abstentions.
oh, that's true. So let's start with October 4th. Anybody see anything? Any corrections?
Yeah, we fixed them because we didn't realize there wasn't a quorum.
Right. So if somebody would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of
October 4th.
October 4th.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of the minutes of October 4th? Approving those?
6, all right.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Oh,
Two
Streeter
abstentions.
and Travis.
I wasn't here. Oh. Come on, that's an abstention.
Okay, then to the minutes of October 18th.
I'm going to amend that Ms. Potter was not present as well. It just says Ms. Mallett and Ms. Hopper.
Oh,
And then the other thing I caught was, it says the girls played Portland, they actually played Scarborough.
oops. Somebody played Portland.
I know.
Yeah, the girls'
They did play Portland.
soccer team played
Scarborough.
Scarborough. Okay, somebody played Scarborough. Okay, yeah.
I was at Scarborough that night, not Portland. That's all I know.
There was a sporting event at Fitzy. I don't remember which team was playing that.
There was, after it says none at this time, the next paragraph, 2 abstentions. I think it should have been abstentions.
Yes, that's right. I just fixed it in here. And actually, somebody, maybe it was the student, he sent it in to me already, yeah.
No, you know what? Don't scratch that. It was actually Portland.
Oh, wow.
The next game was Scarborough, which was the week
Okay,
after.
Okay.
I told you.
Which was the week after, you are correct.
There, actually, is mine, maybe I'm wrong, but mine says October 4th.
Right.
And then it goes on to talk about
Right, it's just the top of it didn't get
Okay.
switched out, so I fixed
All right,
that as
all right.
well.
Okay, and then down in the paragraph about Ms. Aspinwall, it says M made the motion.
Oh, good. Minutes. I'll fix it though, leave it back in.
On the 11th?
No, it was the 18th.
The 18th.
Oh, October 18th.
I can fix
I'm
it.
going to have to give you
Yeah, I can fix it when I get back, yeah.
Okay.
Because I let that, in my-
So that will be corrected.
Yeah.
Any other?
One small change at the end when we're talking about Mr. Russell Nato, and it says the superintendent share the process of how we go through everything. That was this guy.
What?
Oh, that was you.
Well, no, I talked about,
He did,
I talked about the process of
Yeah.
how a policy moves forward, how policy can.
But we can add in Mr. Price.
Well, I would like the notoriety.
I will give that to you.
No, you don't have
I could say, Mr. Price, further clarified with
Yeah.
Mr. Neto in private or something.
Yeah, I can do that.
I'll make a motion to accept these minutes as amended.
I'll second that.
Becky, is that you? Okay, all in favor? Minutes.
Six.
Right, and then so I'll cover it.
Okay, any not in favor or abstentions? One abstention.
Thank you.
Okay, hold on. Get to that to where it's supposed to be here. Okay, student report is next, right? So, take it away.
So, Student Council has finalized the elections. The voting will begin on the 16th and end the Monday of the 19th. And the speeches for all the classes will be held the week before. There's been an increased awareness in the student government this year, variety of reasons, none of which I'm entirely sure about. But I think the general perception is not quite understood still, so Student Council is working on changing how people think of Student Council and what it means to run for student government, which is very important that the rest of the students know that, as well as Student Council as a whole. The school play, Once Upon a Mattress, is coming up. It's on the 9th and the 10th at 7, and there's a matinee on Sunday the 11th. It's a comedic musical twist on Princess and the Pea. And that is, there's a lot of people looking forward to that, so I think that'll be good. There was a Halloween dance on the 27th of October. There was not a huge turnout, but those who did show said it was a good dance. More people than last year, which is good. And sports are wrapping up, and not much else on that, but registration for winter sports is coming up, and those will be in a couple weeks starting, and we'll see how that season goes. The school store is a work in progress. We're aiming for every Friday, but we've been quite busy lately, so that hasn't exactly been happening. Especially during the pep rally weeks, we'd like to be open every day, just so people can have that awareness of school spirit. The Justin's Ring presentation was 2 weeks ago, and Justin's gave the sophomore class a $200 donation to split between anybody who wants to purchase a class ring. There was not much interest, but we did have many people take packets just in case, which I think is nice, just spreading the word. Parent-teacher conferences are the 8th and the 15th, and there's not much to say on those, but And there's a sophomore field trip on the 19th to Boston to look into college and career as we're going into that unit and preparing for that path in the future. That's all I have.
I didn't happen to hear, maybe you heard it, the end result of the student vote that happened for the upcoming elections that multiple pathways ran. I didn't see anything on that.
I didn't know if they posted it online anywhere, but they did announce it over the intercom. I believe Sean Moody won and then Angus King also, and Shelley Pingree, I believe. Other than that, I don't.
And you guys didn't do any local, any smaller
No, there's
elections?
no local stuff on the ballot, but the laws or the bills and laws passing I didn't quite catch, but I'm sure it's somewhere. Fine.
Oh, okay, I just missed that. I guess. You want to fill in any
Sure,
blanks?
so as I'm looking at this, I'll be careful. So there were 304 votes. Total, though, there was actually, the total votes cast were 823, I'm sorry. So it's a 60% turnout of the 1,382 people that could have possibly voted in the building, including staff. So Moody won the,
37%.
yeah, and Mills got
Mills got
32%.
32.
Yep, for that. And Pingree got 35%, and Gorman took 31% of that piece, and then King was 52%, Breaky was second with 26%. Question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, and question 5 all were yes votes.
You students spend a lot of money.
Yeah. So 62.
They don't realize it, though.
Fairly
When
significant.
you add it
Parents are
together.
paying it.
Yeah.
Question 3 was the closest.
There's a strong
Well, the
correlation.
55-45. You gotta think about it. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, I don't have the document. Question 1 was the one about the 3.8%
Yeah,
tax that
right,
was
for the
going to help the healthcare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like highway.
it could have been.
Highway, there's the university system, there was the highway infrastructure. Yeah, so
Yeah, I'll need to look.
3 and 4 were right in, well, question 2 was actually very high as well, 66.
Yeah, it was really just, question 3 was the closest probably.
Question 3 is the transportation bond for highways, bridges.
Yeah.
Related to
Question-
ports, piers, and
What's
harbors.
question 5?
That was one for community
Community
college.
college?
That was the
Didn't do
most,
ranked choice voting for any of these?
We did not.
no,
They made it clear that it would be on the
that was the
actual ballot.
most well-received.
But they had a table that would,
Yes.
you
Question
could
5
go,
is educational programs by upgrading facilities
Oh, yes.
at community colleges.
well, there was water quality in there too, wasn't there? Wasn't there something about a water system? Yeah.
So
Yes.
anyways, yep, spending.
So there was a table you could go to and they would talk to you about how ranked choice, what do you think ranked choice is and how does it work?
And I will have you know, it's not just our students who are in favor, all of our staff voted positively as well, in general.
For what? For
For the staff, I mean, for the questions, they were all in favor as well, percentage-wise.
The opposite on the gubernatorial.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
21 to 9.
yeah. Interesting.
I will say that at least my history teacher was very insistent that we all study. She shared with us a document highlighting everything that was going to be on the ballot. Yeah, I think it was helpful, but not a lot of people paid attention to it. I thought it was interesting.
It's a microscopic look at the citizenry at large.
Yeah, for sure.
actually.
Yep.
Yeah, there are people who pay attention to it and people who don't.
Thank you for the document format, appreciate it.
All right, ready to move on?
Yes.
Second reading of policies.
So if you note, all 4 policies that we reviewed are non-required. So the first one was admission of resident students, JFAA, and the changes to that one there were 2 pieces. One was that where it said resident, where it discussed about residents, it noted also that resident shall mean where the custodial parent maintains a home and where the student spends the majority of their time. Then I did clarify with Patty Kingston about what falls under health, because we don't want to have a policy that sounds like if you're not in good health, we're not going to accept you at our school. And she said the only thing that they look at under that was the immunization, so that word was adjusted. Do you want to take that at a time, or how would you like to do that?
I have a question about this. Is this a time to ask questions or no?
about one of the
Yeah.
individual things? Yeah,
About the resident students.
okay.
So the custodial parent, I'm not in that situation, but aren't there situations where there's joint, 50/50? And so do the parents just get to pick that?
Yeah, the parent says, so what we
majority of
frequently
where they
do
spend their
is, we'll look at a court document. We require that if there are custodial situations, it's not just the parents say, here's how we do this. What's the last standing court document you have that reveals what the custody plan was? Because if the parents have a 50/50, but if you look at it, it says that the student is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and into Thursday with one parent during the school week, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and into the start of the morning on Monday with the other parent, the majority of their school time is with
So
one
it's the
parent.
school time that we're looking at.
Yes.
We have to become really good at interpretation.
And if parents are not willing to provide that, we notify them of the date the student would be unenrolled, because there's typically only one reason. There's either no decree, or they're not following it. And it requires a decree.
Any other questions on this one? I guess we'll take them one at a time. Question. Somebody like to make a motion then? Make a motion.
Second.
Second here. All in favor of approving this policy?
Seven. Yeah. Seven. Second policy is JLC, Student Health Service, and the recommendation is to, that policy was added in 2001. Recommendation is to discontinue that policy. There's nothing in here that it provides a service to that isn't in the MRSA. So it doesn't tell us anything else. It's not where the nurses go to look to see what the requirement is. So it doesn't perform a function.
We have to vote on
Yes,
getting rid of it?
yes, deleting the policy.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to delete this JLC policy.
I'll second.
Are we also deleting JLCB? Or
That's
we-
JLCC, it's different.
Say that again?
There's a cross-reference crossed out as well. Are we going to delete that one too, or just the JLC?
Just this policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did somebody second that?
Yeah, super did.
All in favor of getting rid of this particular policy?
Thank you.
Anybody opposed?
7-0 should be clear. Okay, there is a JLCCB, which is life-threatening allergies, and then there's the R policy. So I'm going to speak to just the JLCCB at this time. The statements that were in our original policy from 2008 stand. The pieces that would be added is that MSAD 60 schools are allergy aware and will implement strategies that reduce exposure to allergens without banning specific foods in the cafeteria or at school, and encourage communications between school and home. And then the other piece that was added into this is the cross-reference of the R, which is the procedures, and the JLCD, which is administration of medications that gets into EpiPens and things like that.
I'll make a motion to accept this policy as amended, as presented, I guess.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor of this policy? I think everybody.
Super, thank you. JLCCB-R is the administrative procedure. The first page, there's 3 pages, the first page is intact. Page 2, under section B, grade level and classroom actions, we would replace what was in the policy, section 1. You can see that that's crossed out with a much shorter statement that says, for all allergies in which some school intervention may be required, the school nurse will develop an emergency medical plan to respond to a student's potential health implications. Bless you.
Thank you.
Under number 3, it talked about in the particular classroom or grade level, if necessary, of the affected student. And instead of saying will be notified of the ban, we're saying if there is not a ban, we'll say will be provided with appropriate educational information about the steps that can be taken to minimize the risks of exposure. And that could be for every student. Over on to section D. We removed the 2 statements that were under bus transportation, and if you just take a minute and look over those 4 statements that have been added. We had, Travis, Dustin, did it again. We had probably 8 or 9 sample policies to look over for this particular example, so we had quite a bit to choose from. So I'm just wondering on D, transportation,
Right.
if there's any specific question to that section.
Is no eating on the bus, is that a standard rule?
It is a standard rule. Occasionally trips, teams, things like that, depends on where they're coming and going from. We have groups that go to Bangor or wherever, or to Augusta, or we have sports teams that are going to travel and they're late. So they'll make decisions based on time and travel and conditions.
But for regular bus trips?
Yeah, so the typical trip is, if there's, as a general rule, there's no eating on the bus.
Okay.
So the bus driver doesn't need to be trained for EpiPens and...
We train them anyways, though.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, we absolutely do. Just don't know.
Okay.
Do they have one on the bus?
Yep, if they have a student with a life-threatening allergy, they have an EpiPen on the bus.
Excellent.
Below section D, instead of the building principal, the training is provided by the school nurse, who will institute that in service in cooperation with the school staff. And since it's the procedural rule, there's no cross-references.
Any questions on this one? No? Make a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept JLCCB-R as amended.
Who said that? Was that Denise? Okay, all in favor of this policy as amended?
Thank you.
It's 8 now. I know, it's 8.
And the last one, now there's one that I had, didn't we have another one listed on here?
Yeah, you have JLIE.
Oh, so it's just, was
This one here is just mistaken
mistakenly,
on here, yeah.
yeah, so it was mistakenly added to the first reading, but it's really the last of the second readings.
Okay. But it looks like this is
And
gone.
the request there is to delete the policy because where's the most appropriate place to put something about student automobiles and parking lots?
Handbook.
In the handbook. It's not a required policy, let's put it in a place where it's more apt to be seen by parents and students.
Okay. Have a motion for that, huh?
I'll make a motion to move JLIE to the student handbook as a rule.
Travis, you are
Second.
on fire tonight.
Do we have a second?
Had a day off.
Did she, Denise, I think, seconded.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of moving this one to the student handbook?
And I'm really sorry that nobody got that. See, Travis is a fireman. You got it? You got it? Thank you.
Scares me how much you two think alike. It's a problem,
I'm
just so
putting
you know.
7-0. Yes, you're right, it's 8-0.
It's 8-0. I said 7 twice.
Maybe that was one.
Yeah.
I didn't even notice.
Travis dressed as a
I'm glad you just said that.
All right. Next one is the first reading.
So this is just notification to the public that the following 3 policies that are non-required, JLG, Education of Homeless Children and Youth, which will largely be driven by federal statute, the McKinney-Vento Act, of which that's one of Sue's 63 jobs, the liaison. And JLF, reporting child abuse and neglect, I think that's under you too. And KE, public concerns and complaints.
That's yours.
You're the complaint department, right?
Yes, I seem to be. So those three policies will be next.
Okay. And are you meeting on a regular basis with that committee?
We're going to, Jen's going to send out a note and ask, Joanne's still away, so it would be Dustin and Estrita, who, instead of being ad hoc, I think said,
Yep.
I'm in.
Oh, good.
She said, this is just so much fun.
It is the best of all the stuff.
For all two of them.
I beg to differ.
That's because, well, it's because he's on it.
Policy knows how to party.
Great.
Well, that's it with our policies for this night, right?
Yes.
Okay, number 8, Maine School Board Association.
So Becky and Nancy, do you have anything to share with people about what you experienced at that? You served as a delegate, right?
That was interesting.
Tell us why.
Well, it was the platform that they were putting forth, which again is just a platform, but I think a lot of people thought this was like passing their own law, and they were very passionate about. And issues were the proficiency-based, while the wording on the platform listed it as proficiency-based diploma, which in the meeting that we had prior,
Said education.
it said proficiency-based learning. And so there was much argument about forcing all schools to use the diploma since the state has
just
made it
backed off on
optional. And many people spoke to their, school situations, people where it did work well, where it didn't work well, and I don't believe it passed as written,
I don't think it should.
because I didn't see a written platform at the end of the days, so that was interesting. Workshops that we went to, I went to the follow-up one on the keynote speaker. Very interesting. He made a poster of all the different things that schools do now and how much it's increased. And I mean, it's like this big.
I actually have it. I'll put it into the
It's very
minutes.
interesting.
Since 1900. For instance, 1900 to 1910, it would say that schooling was mandatory for age 7 and up or something like that, or that scoliosis screening came into vogue at that time. Then it would say from 1910 to 1940, these 7 or 8 pieces, then 1940 to, you want to give some examples?
Sure, so 1910 to 1940, they added in vocational education,
Scoliosis.
phys ed, school transportation. Scoliosis was prior to that. And then 1940s, they added in business education, music and art classes were expanded, speech including drama, half-day K was introduced, school lunch programs, 1950s, so it just continues all the way through. And each year, each of the decades, they're adding probably 5 to 6 pieces. Then the 60s, it got into the 6. And then 1970s, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12, special education being one of those in the 70s. In the 1980s, there's another 20 mandates that are added in. And those, I got to just find the last one that I had, which was, and then the 90s, tech park, school to work, distance learning, homeless education, HIV and AIDS, deaf education, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
And then the very first one for the 2000s was No Child Left Behind. And it just, literally, there's 30 additional pieces in the 2000s. So it just, and the bottom line is, we have not added a single minute to the school calendar in 80 years.
So time is the constant, and whether you learn or not is the variable. And then if you took the chart and you turned it sideways, you could read, adjusted for inflation in 2016, what it cost for the education. And in
It was $487 in 2016 dollars in 1910.
And then by 2000, in the 2000s, it's $14,500.
He was just,
Without talking about
Adding time.
reading, writing, arithmetic, and citizenship, the 4 basic principles that were on there. And Jamie Vollmer talked also a little bit about, has anybody actually sat down and read Thomas Jefferson's development of his position papers and development on public education? His public education was built on, he said, check page 272, you'll see it in Jefferson's own words, it was to rake the muck. It was to separate out. You had to provide schooling for everyone, and schools couldn't be further than 2 miles from any student. And the purpose was to find that 2 to 3% of the population that should continue in school, so to separate them out, and then the other students will drop off. That's an amazing thing to think about. It talks about, in Jefferson's plan, it talks about that schools should be a certain length of time. Guess what? It's about the same number of days, about the same number of minutes. It talked about the division of subjects. It talked about how the day should proceed. Most of those things, the original curriculum that Jefferson envisioned and wrote about at that time, talked about gradation. They're still in play today, built for a completely different age. Now, fortunately, as you may have seen in the TAP article, the Comprehensive Assessment Program, comprehensive, I forget what the A was, I think it was assessment. There was a major article in an online resource that demonstrated 3 high schools across the United States that are doing a lot of things to change schools, to provide flexibility and opportunity and personalization. And one of the 3 schools that they did a major piece on was Noble High School. And it talked about the MP program here, multiple pathways. It talked about student. Am I yelling?
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's now deaf.
I thought I got excited there, Terry. Okay. So it talked about multiple pathways. It talked about proficiency-based education. It went into academies and houses. It went into student structures, the bar program. It went into probably 7 or 8 different features and presented some very interesting data tables on Noble High School as well. So incredible kudos to the staff and administration at the high school who oversee that on a daily basis. We know it's not easy because you don't get to that point by making it easy. You get to that point by making it important. So I would say Jefferson would be looking at some of our high school things going, recognize that, but I don't get the rest of it. What is this?
well, and one other thing that Mr. Vollmer talked a lot about was, and I think he says, we cannot do it alone. Schools cannot do all this stuff by ourselves, and we need to get the community in to actually see what's going on, because a lot of people don't realize all the hundreds of different little things we have going on. A lot of his message was, invite these people into the school. Have them go around with a 3rd grade class one day. So I thought he was very interesting.
And he's a business guy. He's the Blueberry story. He and a partner, a friend of his back in the 80s, decided the friend wanted to make an ice cream product and a Great Western something. And so they started this, and he was like the brains behind it and going to do the marketing plan and so forth. So they started this company, and within 3 years to 5 years, they were rated by People magazine and several other resources as the #1 ice cream flavor in the United States. At the time, Reagan served it at the White House during his events, their blueberry ice cream. 2 guys named Ben and what's the other one? Jerry weren't happy about that. So he was an opponent of public education, an adamant opponent at the time, and he spoke profusely on the topic. And one day in a presentation, someone asked him about, so tell us how you got to this status. He said, well, we use only the best ingredients. We have a certain process that we use in our milk, and we do this to refine the sugar in the blueberries. We go through so much that we reject before we actually find the product that we want. And the teacher in the audience said, it might have been, no, it's the teacher, said, you know, we don't reject any of our product. That might be a difference in our business philosophies.
Business models.
Yeah, business models. So he got that point. And then a principal, I think it was from Louisiana, or something along the river, invited him in for a day and said, don't dress in a suit, come in comfortably, and let's get down on our hands and knees and get involved with these elementary age kids. He came out of that day, he said he's the most tired he's ever been in his life. He said, I have been missing the point, and I need to get into schools and really find out what's going on. And after doing that, he became one of education's greatest advocates, public schooling. And he is very clear that you need to tell your story. Because if you wait for other people to, they're going to say, it's this single test score that comes out every year. What do we know about that single test score? It is the single greatest predictor of how much money your family makes. When I was in a different community, I was previously worked in a high SES community. And one of the years, that school department had the highest scores in the state. And it also happened to be the highest SES that was in the news that year. And then another school district had the lowest scores in the state, and guess what? They had the lowest socioeconomic status per capita homes in the state at that time. It's almost a one-to-one correlation. So he was very clear. Nation at risk, yeah, great, you're looking at certain things. These tests, you're looking at certain things. You've got to tell your story, tell the real story of what's going on. So the Superintendent Good News newsletter that goes out is an example of attempting to provide people with resources. Airing these meetings and so forth is another example of that. Seeing the articles on Noble High School in the news, bringing in as many people into the school as we can. This high school, for instance, last year had 38 business and school groups and civic groups attend full-day presentations on what Noble High School does last year. 38, I believe is the number. There are 38 weeks in a year. They had to get to the point where they said, we're going to change this to once a month. We'll plan it and we'll have larger presentations, but we can't continue to do this because they needed time to do some other jobs.
Do you want to speak to any of the ones where you went to?
Yeah, I went to a workshop on vaping, which is the newest thing. And I have a booklet for you, but I forgot it at home, so I'll make sure you get that.
Thank you.
I went to another one that was about creating a brand for your school, which might be kind of the same idea as telling your story, but I think it was more of a sales pitch for the program that these guys had developed. But, I mean, they had some really good ideas that you could take away without using the program. And then I went to one on how to deal with angry residents at public comment time.
Will you be able to chip in on the
Yeah, have a good
conversation in a few
conversation.
minutes?
Yeah, and one of the things that, I'm not sure I agreed with it, but a lot of schools limit public comment to items that are on the agenda that night. And I know that we don't do that. We just let people have their say. And I commented on that and I said, it has brought up a lot of issues that weren't on our radar that then became on our radar because somebody brought it up during public comment. And, you know, the people who felt that it should be only on agenda items still felt that it should be on agenda items, and the ones that felt it should be more open still felt that at the end.
We actually used to do that.
Just had to only could
Public
speak
comment
to
was
agenda.
typically on things that were on the agenda.
I was happened to be looking at the North Berwick Planning Board minutes earlier today, and I noticed in their meetings, they have several short public comment times. They'll go over one project that they're considering, and they'll have public input, and they'll go over another project and have a brief public input. So it's just something to consider.
Oh, and we had breakfast entertainment by, was it Hollis, or what was the school?
Halldale. Halldale was,
For breakfast?
What was it, breakfast or
I
lunch?
thought it was lunch, and I thought it was
Oh, it
Trape.
was lunch, because I
I
was
thought it was
sitting
Trape
with you.
Academy. That jazz band?
geez, was it?
I thought
It was a
so.
very
I think
nice
you're
school.
right, I think it was straight.
I think it was
It was really nice to see the
It
kids
kind of
there.
Same conference?
We did, actually. It took us a while to find each other, but we did.
It was a blur.
And then my favorite one that I went to was the one on the Ryan Project.
I didn't get to
The
that
what?
one.
The Ryan Project. Have you ever heard of that before?
It was nice to have Nancy in the front row, though. It was fun.
So, and I was, considering it was at 8:30 on a Friday morning, I thought it was pretty fairly well attended, so. That was the, and I went to one on school construction costs on how to do a bond, and I just decided, I just decided you were in charge of that. So,
Okay.
that was that. All right. What is next? All right, Facilities and Finance Subcommittee update.
Let's see. So Travis is on that committee, Lynn is on that committee, and Joanne is on that committee. She was unavailable at that particular meeting. Travis or Lynn, are there anything that you'd like to talk about from the meeting? I'll defer to you folks first.
We didn't have another meeting since our last meeting.
Right.
Oh, so
So, we haven't had anything.
I thought, I'm beginning to think, am I missing?
was this
Just double check my calendar if I missed something
so
today.
you know what, it wasn't the meeting, it was the update that I sent out
Yes.
about the Neil Raposa.
Yeah,
Yes.
I got that, yes.
Yeah. So Neil works for Civil Consultants, and we've tasked him with putting together some cost estimates for us. The middle school Phase 3 came in at $550-ish thousand. The Huzzy, the additions for Huzzy, do you have that right there,
Yep,
Travis?
hold on, how's the parking lot expansion came in around 750,000. And then a potential building expansion came in around 4.5 million. The, what's that one? That's Lebanon Elementary is the campus redevelopment and expansion. That one came in around 15.5 million. The North Berwick Elementary building expansion came in around 3 million. And you already did the middle school, so
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
guesstimate total overall was
24 and a half-ish?
somewhere in here.
Yeah, so about $24.5 million worth of facilities, upgrades, updates, renovations, reconstructions, new constructions. And I was just listening on the news the other day about Lyseth Elementary in Portland, one of their elementary schools, and they're doing a renovation on that school. It was like, I don't know, $16, $17 million. We're doing all these projects in all the communities.
Were those loose estimates or the actual bids?
They were kind of loose estimates off of what he would project if we were to start the projects.
Yeah, so he was very clear, those are rough numbers. He does have a 10% contingency in there, I believe. So there are other associated costs, there are other studies that we need to have done, and each one of those studies are $2,500 to $3,500 apiece. The middle school's already had its study done, so we've already paid for that. So we're looking at, well, we're going to progress with our timeline and see what happens, but those meetings are open to the public as well. and we do post minutes for those, so people can read that on the district website to see what's going on. We do have a meeting, we have a Lebanon facility presentation scheduled on
29?
November 29th,
on the 29th of November. I believe it is
6 to 7:30.
6 to 7:30. So we have, Mr. Reposer is coming, he's a North Berwick resident, I believe, and for civil consultants as well, and he is going to be there to present the redesign, the Lebanon Elementary School itself, as we've talked about, is not a facility like the middle school that once we finish Phase 3, we think that we're putting that building into great shape for two things. One, for the community gets the next 30 years out of it, and two, to bring the customization of 21st century learning to the forefront in the school. Lebanon Elementary, not Hanson, but Lebanon Elementary is not a school that is recommended to be, to invest heavily into because of the kind of structure that it is. So, and I've talked about how it shifts 4 to 6 inches a year, every 6 months at ground level. It's really an amazing thing to step outside and see that and take pictures and then look back at the next one 6 months later and see a completely different look to the paving and the thresholds. So the school is in good shape. It's a functioning school. It will continue to be that for the next several years. The question is how much money to put in to continue to use the school and reinvest in that when there is not going to be a long-term return on the public dollar. So that will be on the 29th. That is open to all three communities, 6 to 7:30. There'll be a tour. We're planning on it being about 65 degrees on November 29th. But in case it's more like 25 degrees, please dress for the weather. Headlamps are advisable. There's not a lot of lights out there. And then we'll have an indoor presentation as well. Did I miss anything, Travis or Lynn?
Our next meeting is the 8th, the 3rd.
Thursday.
Oh, your next
Our
meeting.
next meeting is Thursday, the 8th.
And those take place right here at the central office.
Okay. Now we come to our homework section. Not to be a terrible school board member.
So Dustin, this one is to the board, this one is number. He told me the other day, he said, why do I feel like this is all about me? I didn't even know why he thought that. Terrible habit number 6, solicit complaints.
We're supposed to be doing terrible habit number 18.
Yeah, but we got the wrong thing on here. Yeah. It's both, I can't, it's the one about
Number
talking
6 is
to.
what we did last time.
Right.
Thank you, sorry. Okay, so number 18 was argue with a hostile
Argue with a
speaker. And this is boardroom and public comment.
A lot of the teachers have been telling me how much you've been messing up.
I didn't understand who you argued with. I guess it was me. I'm
So
not sure I was
Becky,
hostile.
chime in with any points that you heard at your thing you went to.
So this was about how you, there's some back and forth, and what they talk about is, don't get into the tit-for-tat situation, obviously, and the options there in Plan B were, what else could have been done? Because the person says at the end of this, what am I supposed to do? Keep my mouth shut when people are spreading misinformation about the district? So the idea is when you have a public speaker here at a meeting, the purpose of that time is, so the whole structure is that this is the board doing its business in the public venue. And then the board invites someone to have a say at the meeting. Now, in our district, it's an open say, except for the pieces that might be illegal to discuss in public. But the temptation has, not this year, seriously, not this year, but in the past, people who've been on the board for a few years would say, yeah, we've seen the number of times that it's become a two-way street. Like, here's the person speaking, the superintendent should be able to present information about that. And of course, sometimes the superintendent can write on the spot, and sometimes the superintendent is going, I don't have that information in my back pocket. So it gets a little complicated. You provide information to some, but you don't provide information on the spot to others. So it says, what do? Do you keep your mouth shut until the end of the public comment portion of the meeting? Ask the board president for permission to speak before you interrupt the speaker. Wait until Betty, the person who happened to speak in this case, finishes her comments and then give your reply. Be more polite in the way you correct the speaker's misinformation. So the real gist of it is, if you're going to have a public comment, you're going to give the public an opportunity to have a say. As long as it's not illegal, what the person is talking about, or against board policy, then the person can have a say. Frequently at the end of that, there were situations last year when that speaker finished and the public comment session ended, and I might say to Dustin, could I have 30 seconds to speak to a certain situation? And I would just share a different perspective on something, not directed at the person, just sharing a different perspective on information, and there's no more public comment on it, and then the meeting moves on. People are going to put out misinformation on Facebook. They're going to come to a meeting and maybe give misinformation, especially if it's a heated topic or passionate topic. So the next part on page 89, it says, it's about the lessons learned. It's know when to listen. And then the lesson for the superintendent, it says in that, exercising some control can help prevent you from becoming a terrible school board. What's the control? It's just saying, I'm going to let this person have a say instead of refuting and getting into a back and forth with people. And then the same for the superintendent is, it says, here's a case where a superintendent would say, I'll be glad to make that information available on our district website. So it could be something that Nancy's listening to and thinking, I flat out know this is the reverse of what we just heard. So, Mr. Conley, would you mind making some, certainly I'll put that out on the district website for everyone to see, because you know how it goes, people hear it in public, that must be true. That person cannot possibly have that information mixed up. And the thing we know is students, teenagers never mix anything up. I know I don't at my age, I don't know about you, but now some of them in other countries with some of these students, and I know they never mix things up. Actually, they've saved me a couple of times. Let's see, it says, so here's an interesting take. It says actually, if that does not stop the board member from talking, sometimes I look at it the other way, like you have to say to the person at the podium, you have a 3-minute time frame, we've done that. It makes people uncomfortable from here because it's kind of like, well, they came to have something to say, they really want to go on, and somebody else says, I'll give them my 3 minutes. That's happened, right? Yeah. We've been in meetings where that has happened. And the point is that you really have to be careful of allowing somebody to take over a meeting or take over a portion of your meeting. It's your meeting, it's just in the public venue. And it says, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the board can't discuss this issue because it is not on the agenda. That is true, but does that also imply, because a person brings it, something that's irritating that person, brings it to that podium, does saying that imply we will put it on the next agenda? And the answer is, you can't take everything that some individual person has a complaint about and say, that'll be on the next agenda, or yes, I'm interested in that too, and I'd like to know more, and we'll seek some clarification information on that. Sometimes I think it's best to let a person have their say in the controlled setting, and then the board moves on with it. Any questions about that particular section of the text?
Well, one of the things that came up at the workshop I went to was that sometimes public comment took on a life of its own, and 45 minutes later, you're still discussing the same issue that wasn't on the agenda to begin with.
And
And,
we've had that happen before.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
it becomes your next board meeting completely.
right.
Yeah, and you get people from all out of town coming in to tell you how to make decisions.
One thing I found with the speakers that was more difficult in public session, that I think I fell into when I was chair, was while we're doing our business in the middle of a meeting and someone from the floor is, can I speak? You know, can I say something about X? And then as a chair, you can't be like, why, yes, go ahead. But then once that, I found that when they can't open up for me anyway, it was very tough to
Get it back.
Because like every 2 seconds, they'd have a different, another, well, actually, and add coming from there, and they were part of the board. And I know I failed as the chair that day because I kind of let things go. So for me, that was harder than running that, because I think the rules we have in place, timekeeper, I think we've done very well with public input for the most part.
Yeah. So I've personally seen a huge improvement from the board on that, and I think part of it is because we talked about it openly. My first year, within the first, I'm going to say my 5th or 6th meeting in, a student from the audience that knew several of the board members actually came up and sat in an empty seat at the chair and provided some feedback. And it was actually a dare from somebody else who said, I'll give you $5 if you dare to do this. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, what the heck just happened here? Like, how was that just okay? And then we had another situation where 2 members from the public pulled chairs up. There was a box of tables, and 2 members pulled chairs up to join into a conversation. And it's like, okay, we have 11 board members now. Who am I speaking with? So I think to let people know what your job is and what the process is and what the parameters are for that is a civic and civil responsibility. And just speaking about board members, just so you know, because I know she would say, you know, I don't like it when you say things about me when I'm here. She's not here. School Board Member Service Award from the Maine School Board Associations recognized Joanne Potter for her 15 years of dedicated service to education in Maine. So I will give her this, and you folks have to promise not to tell her I said it on TV.
And I go back to the other issue, I think these have helped tremendously.
Yeah.
And reviewing the rules of public input at every single meeting, I think has been
If you don't,
good.
if you don't, somebody could be here for their first and only meeting in
Right.
life.
Yep.
And if you don't, if we just put those out as pamphlets,
Yep.
the person might not.
One of the things that I've observed in the past year of being on the board, but also in prior years, just as somebody over there, is what you're talking about, and I don't see it a lot, but that when people have sort of been invited into the conversation, I feel like we are a little bit more likely to give preference to a teacher or another administrator when, I mean, I believe that as for this meeting, they still are members of the public, but I feel like we have been a little bit more likely to invite comment from somebody who is on staff, which I don't know that there's anything wrong with that, but that's just something that I've noticed where we wouldn't necessarily call out to a parent, oh, so, you know, what do you think about that? But we might to a faculty member.
Yeah, so Mike Roberts might have specific information about, or had an experience related to a general topic, or we might be talking about conferences and say, so, Mike, we heard that it was, you know, that within 15 minutes the space is filled up. What's going on with that? And by the way, congratulations, as far as I'm given to understand, is anybody who was looking for a conference this year was able to get a conference, and it was separated out much differently, so that's a huge improvement at the middle school.
And the high school.
And, yeah, thank you, and the high school, yes. Yeah, very concerted effort to say everybody gets their opportunity.
I think having the second public comment session will solve some of the problems like Dustin had. If somebody wants to say something later on in the meeting about something we're discussing, you can direct them that they can bring it up again at the second public comment session instead of letting them take the floor right then.
which I absolutely should have done.
Yeah, but I like what you said about sometimes when the public comment session is over, like you would ask the chair for a little more time to address something, because I think if someone in public comment stands there and says something that is not true about the school or about you, like when someone stands there and says, well, I emailed Mr. Connolly and I never got an answer, hopefully that's not true, I think that should be addressed, because this is being filmed and other members of the public are going to see it.
Yep.
And so I think things like that should be addressed
'Cause if you
after
don't-
the comments are over, but
It just
not
became the
while the
truth.
person is speaking, because
Yeah.
that brings up this whole problem.
Yeah, and it just becomes a truth if you don't address it, but it's when you address it, so.
Yeah.
Any other comments on our, are we going to do new homework for next time?
I'll listen
Let us
to
know.
input. If people don't have input, I've got a topic in mind, but
Okay.
What did I do now?
I'm getting
You
to
just
you,
think about it,
I'm
Mr.
getting to you later.
Just think about it.
All right, new hires, retirement, resignations.
All right, so as you recall, Katrina Aspinwall will be joining a different district from our French program, which we're sad to see Katrina go. I certainly understand, though, it's a building that I used to be principal at, and her house is literally the school wall, the field, and her house. So, and she drives over an hour each day, so I certainly understand. This is, where is the, oh, I got it right here. So, we weren't terribly ambitious on the number of people that we thought we'd get at this time of the year to apply for a French job, because on a regular day in the summer, your odds aren't really good to find a world language teacher, or like a physics teacher, or a special education, low functioning program, high needs. So we were kind of surprised when we got an application from a person by the name of Claire Helene Gaudessart. She is She has, from 96 to 2018, she was principal lecturer at Durham, New Hampshire, University of New Hampshire, on focus areas on communicative classrooms, flipping classrooms, pronunciation, grammar, culture, literature, social and political issues in the Francophonie world. Courses taught elementary, intensive review, and intermediate and advanced French. She also is a French language specialist and instructor is it pronounced Reims, France? Reims?
Rem, I think.
Say that?
Rem, I think.
That was my third choice. Okay. And she also has her master's in German linguistics and a license in German. And she worked at the Sorbonne. Huh? Got it. I got it. She is a lecturer on French languages in advanced courses. She also has taught French for beginners. And so the full spectrum, conversation and composition. She was the coordinator of elementary French curriculum development through a university program, promoted principal lecturer, highest rank possible for lecturers at UNH on topics related to Francophonie, 19th century French literature. I mean,
Goes on and on.
it's like, Joe, you're punking me.
Sounds
This is-
overqualified.
Yeah, this is,
This is
you're
for
kidding me.
the
And
middle
she's-
school, right?
She's like, this is
Oh,
for the
this
high
is
school.
for the high school.
Yeah, she was like, I would be thrilled to do this job. And having been at UNH for all those years, she is very well versed at Noble High School because of the number of interns. As a matter of fact, he teaches math, help me.
Troy
Wagner worked, I believe, under her, took courses from her as well there, and they turn out really good
And Miss-
students for us. So
No.
Croston? Yes. Yes. So we're putting that name forward to the board.
Make
a motion to accept?
Thank you.
I'll second
Don't
that
take it.
with astonishment.
Becky?
Becky, did you second it, Becky?
I did.
Okay, all in favor?
So timing and who you are makes a difference, you know, I guess, that's great.
So we know we have no other retirements or resignations. Do we have any others?
I did my other, and I also snuck in my other about middle school and the high school doing a significant change in the conference times. And also the middle school just had a very successful book-a-week week. And we saw pictures of staff members dressed as characters that I looked at. She and I looked at the picture, so we have no idea who that staff member is. And it was Nancy Landrock that's worked at the school as a librarian for years and years and years. We had no clue. So there were some really great things happening there. The cafeteria went all out. They had a nice little section, a spooky section there. And, you know, the great part about that to me is it says these are 6th and 7th graders, but they still are hooked. They're still interested no matter what they say. And you can promote and you can have fun and you can do learning at the same time. So very, very well received. Congratulations. Another good event at the middle school. Oh, yes. Could you take a minute and talk about that community?
I never introduced myself.
Mike, did you say 30 seconds?
That'd be a first, I know. Mike Roberts, Spencerville Middle School. Yeah, it was a full staff commitment. We started out with a very well-attended family breakfast, thanks to Julie Downs in the kitchen. We invited families, parents, grandparents, little ones to come in, and we knew people had to get to work, so it was more of the 7:15 to 8:15 timing, and they just came in, had a cup of coffee, and it was nice. They actually get to sit down, and sometimes the 10, 11, and 12-year-olds don't quite hug mom and dad like they used to, so it was a nice, positive experience, fairly brief. And a lot of staff, I mean, what they dressed up, I think we had maybe all but 2 staff members that were in characters. And literacy, kids had books, and it was literacy themed, book-a-ween, and it was just fun. It was just fantastic. And the kids that were dressed up in the gym, I think we ended up probably with half to 2/3 of our students that had some version of a costume on that met our dress code. And then it was a quick little parade and a lot of hugs and smiles and family photos. And what was nice about it is the theme continued throughout the day in squire time or nighttime, if you're in terms of the high school similarities, is reading poetry and having teams sit down and go through some more engaged literacy. So it wasn't like the day continued with popcorn and things like that, even though I think there was some. But it was just, it was well done. It was so well done, even this morning in our PD time, the staff, where they were still celebrating and talking to each other, and a lot of moms and dads full of thank yous on the way out and positivity with the kids. And we hope when they get to be a little bit older, they think back to that day in middle school where they carried around a literacy book and had a lot of good times with their teachers. So it was well done. Same walk that the seniors do sometimes when they come in for their graduation practice. So it was, just as principal, a proud day for the middle school, and I think most would agree. So it was well done.
You're going to have to go ways, whatever your next thing is, to top that. So that was good.
Yeah, and I appreciate the public coming out. I think they enjoyed being there. They weren't late for work.
I just also wanted to remind you guys that the board is invited to the dedication of the Ryan home Saturday night at 6. Where the ceremony starts at 7, but we have just some activities that are going to be going on, and I'd love for you to be there if you can.
And the Ryan home just did a fundraiser that was, they had a medium in a room full of about 30 people.
Yeah.
And it was really cool. Some of the stuff that she came up with was highly interesting. And I would say overall, there was an evaluation at the end of it, and it said, would you rate her highly or low? I said I'd give her a medium rating.
Yeah. And that was the whole night with him. The whole night was back in the room doing his thing. However,
My wife came and my daughter,
yeah,
and the conversation with my wife on the way home was priceless. I'm just listening like,
well,
okay.
let me tell you, Mr. Connolly.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it later, but the look on your face when some of the stuff that was coming out, you can say whatever you want. It's pretty
The
interesting,
entertainment value was worth the price of admission.
for sure. Okay.
Anybody else have any other things?
Quick congratulations to the Noble football team for making the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Winning is, it's the first winning season in 12 years.
Yeah, they,
5-4 total record.
the seniors on that team weren't in kindergarten yet the last time we made the playoffs. And they fought a hard game. It was
Yeah.
fun.
Excellent.
And
I almost
the
knocked you
Noble
off the
fans.
bleachers.
The Noble fans?
Oh, the Noble fans outnumbered the Falmouth fans, I'd say 2-1.
Oh, yeah, easily.
We
The
absolutely
parents,
filled their stands. Their
parents
stands were
5-1.
Oh, yeah.
And we scored a touchdown at one point on a, no, you got to kick it, you got to kick, come on, get the 3
They
points on the
didn't.
half before the end of the board, the end of the half, and we got pushed back by a penalty, and now you got to kick. It got pushed back by, now you got to kick. And Kelly, they go for it, and it's a touchdown in the end zone, and he crushes my ribs. We're standing in the top rail, I'm like,
Oh my God, going.
I can't believe they made that catch for a last-second
No.
touchdown in the first half, and I did almost kill the superintendent.
That would have been a thing.
Yeah, that,
That's a good one, though, that's got to say.
but he bought me chocolate chip cookies.
You did, you had to make up for it? That's good.
How not to kill your superintendent.
Yeah,
That must
please.
be an ad appendage.
I want to follow that up with a congratulations to the girls soccer for winning their first playoff game, and then they fell to Scarborough. the
Beat
next
Portland.
round.
Yeah.
Then
This is the first time
Scarborough,
apparently the first time they've ever won a playoff game.
yeah, and it was, what, 4-0, I think?
Yeah, against Portland, it was 4-0.
Yeah.
And Scarborough was a really close game for 3/4 of the game. And it was cold. It was really cold.
Scarborough is number one, right?
Yeah,
First
yeah.
place. That's great.
Good. Anybody else? No? Well, if any, we have our second session of public input. If anybody have public input now? Oh, here she comes.
Nope.
Hi, good evening, Terry Wright, Berwick. I'm just curious, I noticed that you have the parent-teacher conferences at the same time you're doing the school board meeting. Is it still going to be held in here?
That would probably be a yes.
Yes,
it was last year.
Yeah.
yeah.
What date? What date?
I just wanted to be sure before we try to navigate our way in here with everything,
18th?
that this is where you're going to be.
15th.
15, yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
And somebody told me that Brody had something to say.
Brody, I told her. I told her. Good, I didn't get my sandwich last week, but we'll talk.
What is this?
Never mind, never
No,
mind.
you need to give it to me, Brody. There you go.
This is just a bad image.
It's teamwork over here.
But it doesn't look like
We did a good job on the candy.
I'd like to make a motion to
Yeah.
adjourn.
Thank you.
What time do we have?
8:14. Do we have a
8:14.
second? Ms. Mel, okay.
All those in favor?
So who was the second?
Denise.
Denise. And students need signatures?
Yeah, bring them over if you guys need signatures.